They say every man has a line, a point where enough is enough. For me, that line wasn't drawn in ink. It was hammered into dirt, backed by 3 generations of calloused hands and stubborn pride. This land, it's not just property, it's memory, it's legacy, and when a smug HOA president in designer heels tried to erase that legacy with a clipboard and a bulldozer, well, she learned that some fences don't just keep things out, they push back. My name's Thomas Mitchell. I'm a retired schoolteacher, a proud farmer's grandson, and the last man standing between a century-old homestead and a community garden nobody asked for. This is the story of the sign that sparked a revolution. There's a saying my grandfather used to repeat every time he fixed a fence or walked the edge of our fields: "Sunland's the only thing they're not making more of. Protect it like blood." I didn't understand the weight of that until they tried to take it. The sun was just cresting over the ridge, casting long shadows over the frost-covered fields of my family's land in Silver Pines, Colorado. I'd lived here all my life, same 5 acres. My grandfather built his house on in 1952. The same red barn with a sagging roof. Same rust-covered mailbox with our name barely visible. This wasn't just land. It was history, buried in the dirt, stitched into every inch of my skin. That morning started like most coffee bird silence. Then the SUV came, white shiny, with the kind of shimmer you only get from someone who polishes status symbols more than they live in them. I stepped out onto the porch as the woman exited the vehicle. Celeste Ward blazer, sharp enough to slice paper stilettos, totally unfit for gravel. She didn't smile like neighbors do. She smiled like someone who came to collect Mr. Rayner. She called out, balancing a leather folder in one arm. "Just wanted to drop off a few notices. Welcome to Silver Pines Estates." I raised an eyebrow. "That development ain't got anything to do with my land." Her smile didn't budge. "Actually, with the recent county rezoning, your property falls within our association's jurisdiction. You're technically part of the HOA now." "HOA," I scoffed. "Lady, I was here before your roads were paved." She stepped closer, handed me the folder. Meadowview Estates, Homeowners Association, Bylaws, Volume 3. Inside color-coded tabs, maps, citations, violations. "According to Section 12(4), your barn is considered a visual blight," she said sweetly. "Also, the antique tractor near your fence is categorized as non-compliant storage. And this," she pointed to my hand-carved private property, "no trespassing sign. That's unauthorized signage." I stared at her, something hot flaring in my chest. "This property's been privately owned for 71 years. It's protected under a county historical status." Celeste shrugged. "That designation expired when the county's zoning map was redrawn last year. It's all in the assessment." She handed me a glossy flyer, future site of Silver Pines Community Garden, a beautiful addition to our shared landscape. "Right where your barn currently stands," she added. I didn't say a word. I didn't trust my voice. As she turned to leave, I noticed something missing: the sign. The wooden one my grandfather carved by hand. It used to stand by the driveway, now gone. In its place, a sleek metal post gleamed, "Property of Silver Pines, HOA." That night, I sat on my porch staring at the horizon, a folder of bylaws on one side, a half-empty mug on the other. The barn creaked in the wind like it always did. The oak tree out front, the one my father planted the day I was born, rustled gently, unaware. It was next in line. They thought they were just absorbing land. What they didn't realize, they were waking a man who had nothing left to lose but his name on a deed. And that name, it wasn't for sale. By the 3rd week, my mailbox had seen more violation notices than Christmas cards. Every morning brought new threats, dressed up in legalese fines, for non-conforming yard aesthetics, citations for obsolete machinery display, and my favorite, failure to integrate into neighborhood culture. You ever been fined for existing? They wanted to crush me under a mountain of paperwork and fees until I either sold or surrendered. But they underestimated something. I wasn't just another retiree with a porch and a pension. I was a former high school physics teacher. I understood circuits, pressure, resistance. And I was about to teach a lesson they wouldn't forget. It started with sign number 5. Carved from cedar, 3 feet tall, set in concrete. Gone within 12 hours. That night, I dug out my father's workshop notebooks, relics from a time when men fixed things themselves. That's where I found a diagram labeled Field Perimeter Defense, Livestock Safe. It wasn't meant for HOA presidents, but maybe it should have been. With help from Ed Garrison, who ran the local hardware store and lost his pasture to the same HOA 3 months prior, I wired a new sign to deliver a low-voltage non-lethal jolt. Nothing dangerous, just memorable. Like touching a doorknob after walking across shag carpet. If you were trying to rip it out, you'd remember. 2 days later, it happened. I was watching from across the road, binoculars in one hand, thermos of black coffee in the other. At exactly 10:17 a.m., the white SUV arrived. Out stepped Celeste. Clipboard in hand, heels clicking against gravel like war drums. 2 landscaping contractors trailed behind her, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Remove that eyesore," she barked, pointing at my 8th sign. "This is HOA property now." The older contractor squinted at the post. "It says private land." She didn't care. She reached out, bare hands gripping the metal edge to pry it loose. What happened next was beautiful. A sharp pop of static. A yelp. And then Celeste, clutching her hand, staring at my sign, like it had personally insulted her manicure. She dropped her clipboard, the landscaper's. One bit his lip so hard it bled, trying not to laugh. He electrified it. She screamed, waving her hand like it was on fire. "That's assault, no. Celeste, that's physics." What she didn't know, what she never considered, was that half the neighborhood had started watching one of the young mothers across the street film the entire incident. Posted it on the Silver Pines community page before noon. By nightfall, it had 12,000 views and over 300 comments. Finally, someone stopped her. "This is the guy we need on the HOA board. Hope he runs for mayor." I didn't ask for attention. I asked to be left alone. But now the fight wasn't just mine. The next morning, 3 neighbors showed up on my porch with cookies and quiet thank yous. People who'd never spoken to me, people who'd been fined for garden gnomes, for curtains in the wrong shade of beige, people who were scared. "Your sign gave us courage," one said. "She's been untouchable for years." I looked around my property, still standing, still scarred, but defiant. It wasn't about voltage anymore. It was about resistance. And that's when the HOA escalated. That afternoon, I received a formal notice. Celeste was filing charges: battery, criminal misconduct, intentional harm via hazardous installation. But she wasn't just going after me. She was trying to set a precedent. One man fights back, shut him down, because if I won, what would stop others from defending their land? That night, I sat on my porch, Martha's snickerdoodles untouched beside me, and stared at the oak tree that still stood tall despite the storm. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one, but I wouldn't fight it alone. Friday, the courthouse steps in Riverview County were slick with late autumn drizzle. I stood at the base, staring up at the limestone facade, like it was a mountain I never asked to climb. Inside a hearing, Celeste, Harper versus Thomas Mitchell. Allegations: assault, use of unauthorized electrical devices, violation of municipal safety codes. But the real charge: daring to say no. They wanted to make an example of me, paint me as the crazy old farmer with a vendetta and a shocking sign, a relic of a past that didn't belong in their vinyl-fenced vision of the future. I walked inside, boots echoing against polished tile. My lawyer, Anita Carson, met me in the hallway, young, sharp as a tack, and about 3 feet of quiet fury, wrapped in a gray blazer. "You ready for this?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. The hearing began with Celeste on the stand. She played the role to perfection. Hand still bandaged, though I knew the burn was minor at best. Her voice quivered as she described the trauma of being electrocuted while peacefully restoring order to HOA-managed land. She talked about fear, about being targeted, about how I weaponized a sign to threaten authority. The room was silent when she stepped down. Even the judge seemed momentarily caught in her performance. Then Anita stood, cool, calm. "Collected, Your Honor," she said. "We'd like to present video evidence." The monitor flickered to life. There it was, Celeste, trespassing, ordering workers to remove a clearly marked private property sign. Her hand grabbing it voluntarily, and the startled jump back as the circuit fired. Non-lethal reactive, only when tampered with. Then came the audio, her shouting at workers, threatening their jobs, declaring, "I'll handle this myself." Anita didn't say a word during the playback. She didn't need to. When the video ended, there was a beat of silence before the judge leaned forward. "Was she warned?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor." The sign was clearly marked. "And the device comparable to livestock fencing. Legal, non-lethal, and used for deterrence only," he nodded. Turned to Celeste's lawyer. "Do you wish to continue with the assault charge?" A pause. "Then no, Your Honor. We withdraw." Celeste looked like someone had just yanked the rug out from under her designer heels. But it wasn't over. Anita rose again. "We'd also like to submit a counterclaim on behalf of Mr. Mitchell and the residents of Silver Pines." She placed a thick folder on the bench. "Trespassing, destruction of property, harassment, fraudulent property annexation." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And these are sworn affidavits over 80 residents, all citing a pattern of abusive practices by the Meadowcrest HOA under Ms. Harper's leadership, including attempts to illegally annex Mr. Mitchell's historic farm using fabricated surveys." Celeste's face drained of color. Outside the courtroom, news vans were already setting up. When I exited the courthouse, I was expecting silence, maybe a few curious glances. Instead, I was met with applause. Dozens of neighbors stood beneath umbrellas, some holding handmade signs. "We stand with Mitchell, land is legacy. Down with HOA tyranny." Martha wheeled up in her scooter, grinning like a cat who'd eaten every canary in town. "Told you, Tom, sometimes it just takes a spark." The fallout was swift. Celeste resigned before the weekend. The Meadowcrest HOA board was placed under external review. New bylaws were rushed through, ones that required resident votes before any changes to jurisdiction, property lines, or enforcement. As for my farm, it was officially recognized as a protected historical homestead. No HOA developer or county commissioner could touch it again without a court order and a federal permit. But the real victory wasn't just legal, it was cultural. That winter, children from Meadowcrest helped me decorate the old barn for Christmas. The same barn they once called an eyesore. Their parents donated lumber, paint, even an old potbelly stove for the community room we'd built inside. The farm wasn't just safe. It was alive again. As I watched the snow settle gently across the fields, I thought about my grandfather's words. "A man's land is more than property. It's his place in the world." I'd drawn a line in the dirt. Not just for myself, but for every neighbor who'd ever been pushed around by rules written in fine print and enforced with a sneer. And for once, the line held.